If season 5 is shifting power, then the most dangerous shift is not happening in a ballroom, it is happening in ink. Because while everyone is distracted by the mystery of Lady Whistledown, Eloise Bridgerton is quietly walking into the kind of story this show has never attempted before. And no, this is not about her finally giving in to marriage. That would be too simple. For 4 seasons, Eloise has been the loudest critic of the Tons' expectations. She mocked the rituals, she rolled her eyes at the debutantes, she treated proposals like they were polite threats, and she did it so consistently that most of us believed her when she said she would never be next. But here is the detail that changes everything. Eloise never said she did not want love. She said she did not want to disappear. There is a difference. Season 5 is not building a romance that forces Eloise to shrink. It is building one that tests whether she can expand without losing herself. And that is far more complicated. According to the foundation laid seasons ago, her story begins with a letter, a quiet private letter of condolence sent to Sir Philip Crane after Marina's death. No grand entrance, no dramatic dance, just ink on paper. And that is exactly why it matters. Every romance in Bridgerton has unfolded in public view, eyes watching from every corner, whispers following every glance. Even stolen moments felt like they existed under threat of exposure. But a correspondence, a conversation no one else can hear, that is intimacy without performance, and Eloise has always hated performance. Letters allow honesty, letters allow pauses, letters allow someone to be clever without being interrupted. For a woman whose greatest frustration has been not being heard, that is powerful. But here is where the complication begins. Philip in the books expects someone gentle, someone agreeable, someone who will step into his life and help raise his children without resistance. He is practical, structured, grieving. He believes he is seeking stability. Eloise is none of those things. She is opinionated, curious, restless. She questions everything. If she arrives at his door, it will not be as a quiet solution. It will be as disruption. And disruption is not always romantic. Season 5 is not building a fairy tale, it is building friction. Because what happens when a man who believes he knows what he needs meets a woman who refuses to be that version? What happens when Eloise is faced with real children, real grief, real responsibility, not abstract ideas she can debate in a drawing room? This is no longer a philosophical argument about marriage. This is reality, and reality is messier than rebellion. But there is another layer most people are overlooking. Shonda Rhimes has already said the show's Marina is different from her book counterpart. That seems like a small comment. It is not. If Marina's story shifts, Philip's story shifts. If Philip shifts, Eloise's entire trajectory could shift. And suddenly we are not adapting a romance, we are reinventing it, which means there is room for detours, there is room for unexpected turns, there is even room for someone like Theo Sharp, the printer's assistant who once matched Eloise word for word, to matter again. The show does not introduce intellectual chemistry like that by accident. It does not build tension in a print shop just to let it evaporate without consequence. Or does it? Season 5 feels like it is balancing 2 possibilities at once. The steady, book-rooted correspondence with Philip, and the unresolved spark of a connection that never fully closed. And Eloise stands between those 2 paths. One is stability, one is fire. Neither is simple, but here is the part that makes this even more unsettling. Eloise has begun to soften. By the end of season 4, she admitted, quietly, that marriage might not be a trap, that it could be companionship, that maybe what she has been fighting against is not love, but limitation. That shift is subtle, but it is enormous. Because once a character like Eloise starts questioning her own certainty, everything becomes possible. And if season 5 is building something we were not prepared for, it might not be scandal. It might be transformation. A transformation that forces Eloise to confront whether she can have both independence and intimacy, whether she can love without surrendering her voice, whether she can step into a family of her own without losing the fierce mind that made her different in the first place. But what if the complication is not Philip? What if the complication is Eloise herself? What if the hardest battle she faces is not choosing between 2 men, but choosing between the version of herself she has always defended and the version she is slowly becoming, and if she chooses wrong, who is left standing in the aftermath? The truth about Bridgerton Season 5 is not romantic, it is not simple, and it is definitely not what we have been telling ourselves since that Season 4 finale faded to black. Because what if the biggest twist is not who picked up Lady Whistledown's pen? What if the twist is that the entire ton has been quietly rearranged while we were busy celebrating happy endings? Season 4 gave us closure. It wrapped bows around love stories. It handed out approval from the queen like it was sealing envelopes. It let Penelope step into the light. It let Colin stand proudly beside her. It let weddings feel like victories instead of survival. And for a moment, it felt safe. It felt finished. But here's the thing about safety in Mayfair. It never lasts. The final pamphlet of the season did not feel nostalgic. It did not feel like a tribute. It felt sharp, calculated, almost impatient. And the voice behind it did not sound like someone experimenting, it sounded like someone who has been waiting. And that is where things start to become complicated. Because Season 5 is not simply continuing the story, it is repositioning it, it is quietly shifting power away from the people who think they have secured it and placing it into hands we have not even considered yet. Let's start with Penelope. She retired, publicly, dramatically, respectably. She laid down the quill, she stepped out from behind the curtain, and for the first time in her life, she stood in her own name without a disguise. That should feel like growth. So why does it feel like vulnerability? For 4 seasons, Penelope controlled the narrative. Even when she was ignored in ballrooms, she dictated reputations from the shadows. She understood that information is survival, she understood that words are weapons, and she understood that once you give up the pen, you give up power. Now she is a novelist, respected, encouraged, even supported by Queen Charlotte herself. But a novel is not the same as a pamphlet. A novel does not detonate in the middle of breakfast. A novel does not shake a courtship before dessert. And while Penelope builds fiction under her own name, someone else is writing truth under a false one. Do you see the imbalance? The ton has always feared Lady Whistledown because she exposed what they wanted hidden. But now that Penelope is no longer holding that blade, the question is not just who replaced her. The question is why now? Why step forward the moment she steps back? Season 5 is not just about a new gossip writer, it is about the vacuum Penelope created. And vacuums in this world do not stay empty for long. And here is where it becomes even more unsettling. The new Whistledown does not feel reactive. She feels strategic. The wording in that final pamphlet was not emotional, it was deliberate, which means this is not someone scrambling for relevance. This is someone who has been studying, someone who understands that the Bridgertons are no longer just a family of romantics. They are central, influential, protected, and perhaps just a little too comfortable. Comfort is dangerous in a show like this, because comfort makes you careless. Colin believes the secret is over. The Queen believes the game has ended. The Ton believes the storm has passed. But storms do not end in Mayfair. They shift direction. And if Season 5 is building anything, it is not just a new mystery, it is a power struggle, one that places the Bridgertons at the center of something far more unstable than scandal. Because what happens when the family that survived Lady Whistledown becomes the family targeted by her successor? What happens when the protection of love is no longer enough? And what happens if the person holding the pen knows the Bridgertons better than anyone else in that ballroom? The truth about Season 5 is more complicated than we realize because this is no longer about secrets being revealed. It is about control being taken, and the Ton has no idea it is about to lose it. So the real question is not who Lady Whistledown is now. The real question is who she is coming for first. If you think Season 5 is only about a new Whistledown and Eloise's letters, then you are looking at the surface. And this show has never been about the surface. Because while secrets move through Mayfair in pamphlets and ink, something far quieter is happening inside the Bridgerton house itself. Something that feels warm, domestic, even joyful, and that is exactly why it is dangerous. Let's talk about legacy. By the end of Season 4, the Bridgertons were no longer scrambling to survive scandal. They were stable, married, settled, expanding. Benedict Bridgerton and Sophie stepping into marriage after tearing down a class divide that once felt impossible. Colin and Penelope building careers side by side instead of secrets between them. Love stories completed, but completion in Bridgerton is never the end. It is repositioning, because when a family that once felt slightly chaotic becomes powerful, influential, even admired, it stops being underestimated. And the moment you are no longer underestimated, you become a target. Season 5 is building a Bridgerton dynasty. Babies are coming, new households are forming. The name Bridgerton no longer belongs only to romantic young debutantes. It belongs to authors, to artists, to mothers, to men who have already proven they will burn down the rules for love. That is not soft power, that is influence, and influence threatens people. Now place that reality beside a new Lady Whistledown who writes with precision. A writer who understands timing, a writer who may not be interested in random scandal, but in strategic exposure. Do you see where this is heading? If the Bridgertons become the emotional heart of the ton, exposing them becomes the fastest way to destabilize the entire social order. A whisper about any other family causes chatter. A whisper about the Bridgertons causes earthquakes, and there are cracks to exploit. Penelope may be reformed, but her history exists. Eloise may be evolving, but her independence still makes society uneasy. Benedict may have married for love, but class prejudice does not vanish overnight. Even Violet Bridgerton, the steady matriarch, is beginning to feel the quiet pull of something unexpected with Marcus Anderson. And that might be the most underestimated complication of all, because Violet has spent years guiding her children toward love while denying herself the possibility of it. If season 5 pushes her toward romance, toward rediscovering desire and companionship after widowhood, that is not a small subplot. That reframes the entire family. A matriarch in love is not just sentimental, it is destabilizing. It shifts authority, it changes priorities, it introduces vulnerability at the top of the household, and vulnerability at the top trickles down. What happens if Violet chooses happiness over control? What happens if her focus shifts inward just as external pressure mounts? What happens if the family's emotional anchor begins to drift? Season 5 feels like it is quietly stacking these tensions. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deliberately. New power outside the house, new uncertainty inside it, and layered over all of it is grief. Francesca's story has not finished unfolding. Love found, love lost. And somewhere in the quiet space left behind, something complicated is forming. Grief changes people. It makes them braver or more reckless or both. And if multiple Bridgertons are stepping into uncertain emotional territory at the same time, who is steady enough to hold the center? That is what makes this season feel different. Previous seasons built toward romance, toward confession, toward lust, toward resolution. Season 5 feels like it is building toward exposure, toward transformation, toward consequences that ripple across the entire ton instead of settling neatly around one couple. The truth about Season 5 is more complicated than we realize because it is not focusing on a single love story. It is testing the structure of the family itself, and families do not fracture in loud, dramatic explosions. They shift slowly, quietly, until one day you look around and realize the ground is not where it used to be. If a new Whistledown decides to strike at the Bridgertons strategically, if Eloise's choice challenges the version of herself she has always defended, if Violet allows herself to want something again, if grief, love, ambition, and power all collide at once, then Season 5 is not building toward a wedding, it is building toward a reckoning, and the ton may survive it, but the Bridgertons? That is a much more complicated question. If you think Season 5 is only about a new Whistledown and Eloise's letters, then you are looking at the surface. And this show has never been about the surface. Because while secrets move through Mayfair in pamphlets and ink, something far quieter is happening inside the Bridgerton house itself. Something that feels warm, domestic, even joyful, and that is exactly why it is dangerous. Let's talk about legacy. By the end of Season 4, the Bridgertons were no longer scrambling to survive scandal. They were stable. Married, settled, expanding. Benedict Bridgerton and Sophie stepping into marriage after tearing down a class divide that once felt impossible. Colin and Penelope building careers side by side instead of secrets between them. love stories completed, but completion in Bridgerton is never the end. It is repositioning, because when a family that once felt slightly chaotic becomes powerful, influential, even admired, it stops being underestimated. And the moment you are no longer underestimated, you become a target. Season 5 is building a Bridgerton dynasty. Babies are coming, new households are forming. The name Bridgerton no longer belongs only to romantic young debutantes. It belongs to authors, to artists, to mothers, to men who have already proven they will burn down the rules for love. That is not soft power, that is influence, and influence threatens people. Now place that reality beside a new Lady Whistledown who writes with precision. A writer who understands timing, a writer who may not be interested in random scandal, but in strategic exposure. Do you see where this is heading? If the Bridgertons become the emotional heart of the ton, exposing them becomes the fastest way to destabilize the entire social order. A whisper about any other family causes chatter. A whisper about the Bridgertons causes earthquakes, and there are cracks to exploit. Penelope may be reformed, but her history exists. Eloise may be evolving, but her independence still makes society uneasy. Benedict may have married for love, but class prejudice